Good morning. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. It's 9 a.m. We're continuing our conversation about federal funding around the state. And this morning, we're delighted to have with us the regional planning commissions and three of you from three of the different commissions. So we're very glad that you were able to come. I think you have not testified in here this year, have you? So we get to go around and introduce ourselves. We get to try to do that at least once a week so we remember who we are. So Dave, let's start with you.
Greetings, I'm Dave Iacovoni from Morrisville. I represent the Lamoille, Washington district.
Good morning, John Kosenska from Burke. Welcome. I represent 10 towns in the Essex Caledonia district.
I'm Mike Nigro. I represent Bennington and Pelham.
Tom Stevens from Waterbury, representing the Washington Chittenden district.
Morning, Jim Harrison from Chittenden, also represent Mandan, Killington, and Pittsfield.
Robin Chai from Middlebury.
Tiff Lilly from Burlington.
Trevor Swirl, Underhill and Jericho.
Wayne Rush, Highgate, Berkshire, Franklin, and Richford.
Good morning, I'm Mike Murphy from the Wyndham Ford District, Putney and Dummerston.
Good morning, Lynn Dickinson. I represent St. Albans Town.
So if the three of you will introduce yourselves, and did you give us this presentation? Does Aaron have it yet?
No, I am trying to send it and it's spinning, but we'll get there.
Okay.
More details
You do
from
it
these probably.
without that.
Yeah. So for the record, Charlie Baker, I'm the Executive Director of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission.
And I'm Peter Gregory, Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission.
And I'm Catherine Dimitrick, Northwest Regional Planning Commission.
And if it's okay, we'll give a little bit of background on RPCs and do some context setting and then kind of dive into different federal funding programs and just have loose conversation. So just intro to RPCs. In the absence of county government, we play the role of connecting towns with federal and state resources. And as a forum for towns to discuss joint issues, we are political subdivisions of the state, provide broad services to every municipality. Here are the kind of typical topic areas that we are working in: transportation, land use, housing, brownfields, water quality, economic development, energy planning, hazard mitigation, and emergency preparedness. So really, I try to generalize it like place-based activities. So we're not in social services, we're kind of the place-based services. Some quick facts from our last year. We do, as part of our regional planning grant program with the Department of Housing and Community Development, we do an annual report and then we aggregate this, the report. So just here's a little bit of facts. So there are 11 RPCs. You can see the map there. We have about 135 staff, so a little bit more than 10 staff per RPC. Serving all of the municipalities. And just from last year, we did 113 grant applications on behalf of our towns. That's just one little factoid. Happy to share a lot more facts, but.
So those are grant writing systems to towns that don't have grant writers. So
It depends.
Middlebury has staff and so the RPC there probably isn't doing much, but they might be just something in a little town like Leicester or somewhere where there's not staff.
Yeah, and like, I can talk about Chittenden County, yeah, our large towns, yeah, they'll tend to write things on their own. Not all the time though,
Right.
and our small towns is where we spend more of that staff assistant. In terms of governance, the municipalities, the towns appoint representatives to our board. So we really work for the towns in aggregate. Our boards approve our budgets and set policy and program priorities, including our regional plans. We each have an executive committee, so there's a subset of the board that oversees the executive director and maybe more of the personnel issues and things. And then each of our boards typically has a bunch of subcommittees. Some of them are subcommittees of the board. Some of them are additional appointees from the towns. So like our transportation advisory, technical advisory committees have towns appoint somebody to serve on that committee as well. Same thing with other like emergency management committees and things like that. So any questions on governance? Okay. Funding, more up your alley. No real news here for you, but we have no general tax revenue. We don't have the authority to tax, so all our revenue comes from state and federal grants with some limited town dues. Typically, the last time we kind of have surveyed ourselves, it's like 5 to 7% of our budgets come from municipal dues. So that means like 95% from federal and state, right? I often talk to like new board members that we kind of act like a public sector consulting agency. In other words, we only get paid when we win a contract, and we only get another contract or grant agreement from the agency if our work is up to snuff, right? So we kind of have that kind of mindset. It's a little more entrepreneurial than maybe a typical government employee because we're constantly looking for new funding and how to support our municipalities. And then we listed, I'm sorry for the alphabet soup there, but and I know this committee is probably more familiar, but
Yeah.
here's the typical grant funder. So I mentioned Agency of Commerce, Community Development, V-Trans, that started with the state agencies here, Agency of Natural Resources, Emergency Management, Agency of Administration, Building General Services, Department of Public Service, Vermont Department of Health. So those are all state agencies that we typically have grant agreements with. And then the federal agencies, USDA, so Department of Agriculture, Economic Development Administration, Environmental Protection Agency, and USDOT are probably our biggest federal funding partners. And then Northern Border Regional Commission, I guess they're federal. It's federal money anyway, but they're in northern New York and across northern New England. And then the municipal town dues. Any questions on our funding? And sorry, this is a really quick, simple slide, but we've just in the last couple of days polled all of the executive directors. And just to give you a quick sense, I'd say minimum is that, and whichever way you want to look at this, minimum RPC probably has 40% of federally sourced funding in their budget. And that goes up to 60. I might be closer to 70%. So this is just kind of giving you a quick picture. 40% state, local, 40% federal, and then that 20% depends on each RPC. Some are less federal and some are more federal.
So is this because, Charlie, you're Chittenden County, and what do you get that puts you more in the close?
Yeah, so thank you. Special is the word you're looking for.
We're trying to.
That's a joke. But yeah, there is one unique funding program that comes through USDOT through V-Trans for metropolitan planning, because we have more larger urban population of over 50,000 people in an urban population. So we get MPO funding through V-Trans.
Right, and you're the only one in the state.
Exactly.
The metropolitan, yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that definitely skews the Chittenden County budgets up.
Yeah.
Questions on that? And then we just threw up some grant programs that kind of came to the top of mind as we were thinking about things that were of concern or have been already terminated. I don't know, maybe we should start with what has been terminated. You want to jump into that, Catherine, since you've been
Sure, I'll
dealing-
get the fun list. So there have been some specific terminations or pauses for our Regional Planning Commission. And contrary to our grant agreement, the federal government terminated an $875,000 grant we had through EPA. We're in the appeal process for that now, but I don't expect that will result in any different answer, but I feel like we still need to do the appeal process. That was actually a really cool grant because it was to do bike and pedestrian active transportation facilities in our rural towns, and to see if we can come up with innovative designs that would enable towns to build those with their own staff cheaper, more cost effectively, and more quickly. So that's a real loss to lose that, because that would have been a really great demonstration of how we might do things differently. All the regional planning commissions were involved with the Department of Health in a health equity grant, where we were working with our local communities and our community partners to make sure that programs, policies, projects really took into account health across the board for everyone, including those who typically get left behind. That was canceled at the federal level and impacts the state as well as the pass-through that they were giving to the regional planning commissions.
How much was that? For
The latest round, in total, I think was about $150,000 to $175,000 for the pass-through to the regional planning commissions. I don't know the total at the state level.
Yeah.
I can only speak to our part. And then the final one is Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. That was a specific grant given to Vermont's counties. So each county received $75,000 to do energy efficiency and conservation projects. Several of those county court systems transferred the grants to the regional planning commissions to manage and undertake them because they don't have the staff to manage a federal grant. And those grants have been canceled or paused. And
How much is that?
I don't know how many RPCs. I think it was 5 or 6 regional planning commissions, so times $75,000.
And there's another one up above the list, that Partnership for Strategic Urban Forestry Investment in Disadvantaged Communities. It was also canceled. Vermont had 2 grantees that I'm aware of, Newport and Winooski. Not sure of the amount in Newport, but Winooski lost, it was $1 million grant as part of their Main Street reconstruction project. So a pretty significant blow to Winooski, because I think that total project is like maybe $8 or $9 million. So this was a big chunk of it. And so those are the things that have been cut so far. And you can tell a little bit of theme there about some equity issues and climate. I'm sure the energy efficiency had kind of that climate bad word for the federal administration. So those were some of the early cuts.
I would also mention, if I may, the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities BRIC grant, which comes through FEMA. That has been canceled. I know there's an annual request that Vermont Emergency Management submits to FEMA under that program. And it does a number of things, including usually funds about a dozen local hazard mitigation plans that all your communities need to do on a 5-year basis to get FEMA approved, which then qualifies them for a smaller local match when there are disasters. So without that federal funding for those plans, unless there's a potential new source, either state funds or other federal sources, the communities themselves would have to fund the preparation of those plans. So that is a direct loss. And again, they're our smallest communities that can least afford not getting the most match they can when we do have a disaster. So that's a particularly painful one.
And how much is that one?
Well, I think they're about $10,000 a piece, and if they seek, a dozen towns or more each round, that's $120,000 to $150,000.
Yeah, and there was more that was available to Vermont this year, because I know we were working on an application for about 200,000 of that fund with VEM. So it must be significantly more than that. I don't know.
It definitely is. And local hazard mitigation was just one slice of the overall BRIC application that's in on an annual basis. There's a set aside percentage, I think, that each state gets on BRIC funds. So it's you apply for it, you get it, but now it's out there.
And that is a funding pool that also funds buyouts and hazard mitigation construction projects. So it's a huge loss to Vermont.
Yeah, I guess VEM would have the most recent information about that, but I think it's a 7-figure loss.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe we should just pick up the FEMA theme. The other major program under FEMA that well, Kathy, you want to talk about that?
Sure. I can talk about the Emergency Management Performance Grant. So that is a FEMA program that benefits the state of Vermont in 2 ways. It helps fund some of the Vermont emergency management staff. And then a portion of that is passed through to the regional planning commissions, which we match. It's a 50-50 grant program. So we use some of our state grant dollars to match that. That provides funding to each regional planning commission to do a variety of things. It funds about a half to full-time emergency planner in each regional planning commission. And those emergency planners are available to help our communities prepare for, respond, and recover from disasters. As you know, our communities do not have the staff available to just be ready. So we serve as that expertise and we're able to step in and do that. Additionally, we are trained, we have 2 or 3 staff members at each RPC trained to serve in the State Emergency Operations Center. So we are backup staff for the state when the Emergency Operations Center is running at full staffing. And so loss of that would be huge. It already received a cut at the federal level last year, and it's definitely in sights, we think, for future cuts. And that would be a blow to our communities in terms of the Regional Planning Commission's availability to be the on-the-ground technical assistance to our communities to prepare, respond, and recover from disasters.
And since Irene, the towns call us first when there's an issue. They know us, we've established relationships with them, the road crews know us. So our ability to respond has been lessened because of the cuts in past years and the potential loss entirely. But again, our role in emergency management has been substantial since Irene. And if there is a FEMA restructuring, I would ask that your support in making sure that our expertise and relationships are leveraged to the fullest extent in any kind of restructuring and how Vermont prepares for and then responds and recovers from disasters.
You hear about this with the Vermont Emergency Management this week? Not sure that I heard them talk about that when we were with them. Okay.
We'd love to be part of that conversation.
We went on a field trip that we we didn't hear them talk about this. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So can I just take a sideways step here? So with the loss of all these funds and programs, first of all, are these definite losses or are they frozen with the possibility that when this dream is over, that the money will flow? Or is this gone?
Some of it's just gone unless there's a court case that restores it. But at least we don't have the capacity to be part of court cases. So unless there's, like, for the grant that we lost, the government to government grant, unless there's some class action appeal that's led by some of the larger entities, the money's just gone. It's never coming back.
And if I'm cutting to the chase, if there's a slide or a conversation that's upcoming, just tell me and I'll back off with the question. But so there's a flood tomorrow and it affects the Connecticut River Valley and, wherever. How are you hamstrung by not having this money or capacity to react to helping communities? I mean, like what would happen if you woke up and you said, oh my God, we don't have that anymore? What would be the reaction?
I'll go dark.
Because it's Connecticut River,
No, but I think my
biggest extreme.
Yeah.
Peter has got this.
But my biggest concern at the moment is that FEMA won't be there. So we are seeing, and I was just reading, Arkansas just got turned down for disaster declaration assistance from Trump. Right, he denied giving them FEMA funds and said in Arkansas. Right, this is not a blue state. I mean, it's Sarah Huckabee Sanders. This is a governor, right? So somebody that knows pretty well. But the federal government denied typical FEMA disaster assistance, saying basically, well, the state and locals can handle it. We don't think it's big enough to warrant federal engagement. So stepping back, I'm concerned at that big picture. If Vermont has been a pretty significant user of FEMA funds. We've had a lot of disasters, certainly relatively speaking, to other states. And so if FEMA is not going to be there anymore, that is a huge issue. So, and I'm sorry, I'm getting to your specific answer, which is for us, we have had an agreement with VEM that when there was a disaster and they had confidence they would get reimbursed from FEMA, we would be boots on the ground for them with communities. If that money is not there, I don't think we'd be able to do that. And so I think the staff capacity, at least at our level, I think would be curtailed until we had confidence that they were going to be able to get paid. So that was my negative maybe these guys would be more positive.
And that's I mean, and just getting to the row of dominoes effect. So if you have to if the federal government tells you that there's no money for you to help, and you tell the municipalities and individuals that there's no capacity to help them, and so the state and municipalities have to then turn around and tell their residents that there's no way you lift yourself up by your bootstraps kind of attitude. Is that what is that the role of dominoes?
That was a Tuesday. And I think it's gonna come back to the state, right? It's like, what's the state doing to fill the gap? It's a huge challenge, I think.
Yes, it is, considering all the other gaps.
Yes, yeah,
I
right.
mean, as far as being there to answer phones for towns after disaster and helping them document damages and stuff, I think we would find a way to do that. I mean, we've got those relationships. We're trained in that. We do continuing education on all that. I think over time, if those resources aren't there, our experience and capacity will diminish. But I think in the short term, to answer your question, I think we would continue to be able to do that for a short while. It's the funding of repairs after the damage that is the bigger issue, not being able to document the needs.
Jim and then Wayne.
Thank you. So, I have no idea what the specifics are in Arkansas, but, isn't the threshold, and I know we try to document when we have an emergency, by county to get above a certain level, isn't that statutorily set?
In the US code, it's $1 million, and there's a formula to get there, and that's.
I mean, obviously, there can be disagreement as to what qualifies, what doesn't, in terms of getting to the $1 million, but I would think if there's agreement that you have $1 million of damage, I mean, whatever, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems to me that would be subject to challenge if it's statutorily set.
And I might add, that there has been talk about at the federal level of changing that threshold because it's been the same for a very, very, very long time.
And that's a reasonable conversation to have.
Absolutely is. And the Vermont treasurer is thinking exactly in that realm of how do we handle up to perhaps a new threshold as a state.
Okay, thank you.
But I don't.
And then John.
Just to finish that, I don't think the president is under any mandate to approve disaster declarations and assist. I think there's a may clause there, I think, because that's why it goes to the president's desk every time.
So there is some.
That's my belief. I'm not an expert in it, but.
Okay, good to know. Again, I don't know the particulars down there, but we could have it in. And I also know, because from time to time, Congress has had to supplement that budget. If there's no money, there's no money in that fund. You can't unless Congress. So, okay, good to know. Thank you.
Wayne and then John.
I think I know the answer, but just to be clear, so you're getting some pass-through money that, like in the case of the health department there, but you're also making applications for grants directly from the different federal agencies.
Yeah.
Regional planning commissions have been pretty adept and successful in leveraging the funding we do get from the state in drawing down discretionary federal dollars. We've done that for years on brownfields and a whole host of things. So.
And like for brownfields, for example, all the regional planning commissions have at some point or currently hold brownfields site assessment grants from EPA. In our region alone, we've received over $5 million in direct federal grants to do both assessments and cleanups, including we have a $2 million revolving loan fund that's been established through direct federal grants that we applied for.
I've asked this question here to a couple of groups coming here recently here. You have communication with individuals at the federal level based on all that you shared here today. Are you still maintaining those contacts? Because we realize that things are being cut here. Might have had a person you've worked with here for months or years, but now they're not there anymore.
There is some of that. There is delays in getting responses because number of people are less. There are people that are gone that we have been working with. There are others that don't know if they'll be next and they're demoralized. We were in Washington, in March, and a lot of the federal staff were nervous about communicating because there's just some unknowns at that point, but.
Because that's the thing, I've been hearing here, the delay.
Yeah, that's
As
absolutely,
things come up, you can't wait.
whether it's a permit from A and R,
Yes,
if there's a lack of staff, it's going to slow down in response time,
Yeah, yeah, we have a grant where I think we're on our fourth or fifth federal agency liaison. So they kind of, and I think now we're up in a management person because there's nobody left. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so FEMA, definitely a big concern. Maybe we should talk about EPA, which is both probably the climate pollution reduction grants and brownfields in particular, talk about the CPRG.
Sure. So the state of Vermont does have a climate pollution reduction grant. It's a planning grant through the federal government, and there is a portion of that that's passed through the regional planning commissions to do local and regional energy work and to help support Vermont's climate action plan. That was paused temporarily. It was, as of yesterday, unpaused, but the future is uncertain. So we definitely are worried about that. And we're trying to get our work done under that grant as quickly as possible, while at the same time not leaving ourselves too exposed. And that's the balancing act we have. We're trying to finish these projects, but the first time in my career, we can't count on the federal government to pay its bills. And so we're trying to keep our work going, but not leave ourselves too exposed.
So is that a reimbursable grant?
That's a reimbursable.
Okay. And how much is that one?
Overall, it's about a $300,000 grant to the RPCs from the state climate office. And I will say our state agency has been amazing to work with on that. Have been very communicative and really trying to work with us to keep that going to the best that we can.
Yeah, it's got that bad word climate in it. So, and then brownfields, we haven't really heard a lot about that, but just, it's in EPA, but it's a really important program to us, and we think Vermont in general, just in terms of any redevelopment project probably has some brownfields money in it, and sometimes not even redevelopment. It could just be a site that was in the wrong place, or maybe it had some historic use. So I think that's just a general concern at this point, right? I'm also reminded there's one agency we didn't list here, Department of Agriculture, USDA, particularly their rural development program, has been a big source of funding for our communities. And, we do a lot of applications and things to USDA rural development. I heard, I don't know if this is true, that the Vermont, New Hampshire staff has been already seen a significant reduction. And so, concern about whether those grant programs are still going to be there or things are going to keep moving. Does that touch you guys at all?
Not yet. I think we're all waiting on a farm bill and the fight that'll happen in Congress over the rural development title and SNAP and everything else.
And we heard that from the Secretary of Agriculture and Tenants. The farm bill is big and uncertain, and we don't know when it's going to happen. And
and I think it's a little unusual, or seems a little weird, but USDA does a lot of investment through that rural development program in community infrastructure. Actually, that Main Street project in Winooski has USDA money in it. So they, invest in sewer and water and other kinds of community infrastructure. So that would be a big loss. Did I already talk about the urban forestry project?
Winooski and Newport.
Yeah. Northern Borders Regional Commission, those are somewhat new, or at least that one is newer. Is it 10 years old now, maybe? But just uncertain. Congress has been kind of moving towards creating these regional commissions to cover the entire country, but it's still a patchwork in development and very uncertain, at least from my view, as to whether, this administration is going to support that or take it away. It's been a big deal here. It's even more important in like the Appalachia, Regional Commission is a huge regional commission in the South. So, I think they cover maybe 20 states or something.
Right.
So it would be a big deal to cut these regional commissions, so we're hopeful that they stick around, but just a little uncertain
And
anxiety.
that's been a huge source of funding for our municipalities,
Yes.
economic development infrastructure.
Right, and I remember when I first started and then it expanded to counties that were just along the border.
Yes, and
So it's been
we're-
benefit.
I'm okay with that.
Those of you on the border, yes. Share life.
Thank you, Senator Leahy, for doing this.
Yes, yes, I know, we have a lot to thank Senator Leahy for.
But at least the the federal regional commissions were reauthorized when EDA was reauthorized last December and signed by President Biden early in January. So it's got authorization, and then in some ways, authorized programs are a little bit less vulnerable than unauthorized, but who knows, this Congress and the things they have to do. But EDA is another funding source that I don't know if we've talked about yet. That provides planning grants to economic development districts. And we've got a couple areas of the state that are seeking district designation, yours, which is most of the west side. And then Southern Vermont is just put in a SEDS for approval, a comprehensive economic development strategy. They've got to modify theirs to take out certain language that isn't approvable. But planning grants are paused right now for those districts around the country that were set for January or April renewals. But again, I think it's just a matter of how those are branded, the economic development administration's work. Perhaps to see less investment in large urban areas with the big flashy projects, and maybe a return to more distressed communities in the rural areas that would, I think, fit well with the current administration's thinking and would probably help Vermont. So our National Association is very engaged in aspects of EDA. That's a core constituency for us.
And in addition to funding the planning grants, Economic Development Administration also funds infrastructure projects. For example, they funded a water line in the town of Fairfax to run to the Run Amok Maple, which you've probably heard of. So there was a $500,000 grant that funded that to enable that business, which employs about 30 people now, I think, to stay in business and continue to grow and expand. Additionally, they have disaster resiliency funds. After a declared disaster, they get a chunk of funds to help with disaster recovery. And our northern 6 counties, the Northern Vermont Economic Development District, has been the recipient of 2 of those. The one that we have right now is looking at the Lamoille River and doing some flood modeling so that we can be better prepared. So if there's a flood in Eden, we know that's going to mean for Fairfax 3 hours later. So that work is crucially important, and a loss of that would be hard.
So getting back to the northern border development, do we have any handle on what our total, whether it's to RPCs or whether it's to the state, we're getting annually through that mechanism? Because yesterday we had the Joint Fiscal Committee had a grant approval for $391,000 for outdoor recreation, and that's over several years. But do you have any?
The Department of Economic Development is a liaison with the Northern Border Regional Commission. They will have a list of all awards over the years, and yeah.
They're coming in today.
Right. So.
Oh, yeah, it's in multiple billions.
Yeah.
Maybe I look for it online.
There was something on Northern Borders
Yeah.
Regional Commission. We're going to get anyway, we'll ask them when they come in. They're in it.
Okay.
So we can-
Good. Thank you.
We didn't put USDOT on here. They generally seem like their core programs are probably good and will stick. They have done some discretionary grants, over the last, certainly over the last administration and going back a couple, but, they may pull back on some of those discretionary grants. But that's kind of at the margins, I think. In terms
But
of-
we heard from the Agency of Transportation, and they have been sort of assured that all their money is safe.
Yeah.
As much as, so of all the agencies we talked to, they feel the most confident. It's clear that they're the least likely to get affected. So that doesn't surprise me. Wayne?
Just back on northern borders, are they under EDA?
They're separate.
They're a separate federal agency, but they were reauthorized under the EDA reauthorization, but they are separate.
Money doesn't flow through EDA to them.
Sometimes they partner on different programs, but it's separate.
Thanks.
And I think the big takeaway, I think, of the couple points of concern, at least in my mind, one is the disaster recovery funding, the FEMA bucket of, what do we do if FEMA is not there, or at least for smaller disasters, that million to 5 million, I'm making up 5 million, but are we prepared to deal with those as state and towns? And then the second thing is just infrastructure investment. Particularly, sewer and water, and we're talking about addressing our housing crisis and the need to grow homes. And without some of that infrastructure investment, it's without that federal funding, I should say, it really is going to come back to more, state and local. And so there was maybe a long lead up to anything you can do to support the financing tools that are in the housing bill right now, being considered here in the General Assembly would be important, because I think we're going to have to look to those being able to self-finance some of those things, than be able to rely on, USDA or EDA or Northern Borders for infrastructure investment.
Yeah. And a lot of that's in the budget. I mean, the housing bill is going, but the money's been pulled out and is in the budget. So
Yeah,
that's where I look for it.
And then I think just, long-term from a structural perspective, one of the things that federal funds have done for the regional planning commissions is enable us to build a strong quality staff that is available to be responsive to state and local needs. And if the federal funding long-term does continue to diminish, that impacts our ability to retain that staff that is then available to help the state and respond to state policy, program, and project needs, and to support our towns. And so we do have some long-term structural concerns about our ability to be as valuable to the state as we have been and want to be.
And you guys play a very important service, and we've seen that through certainly disasters, but not exclusively disasters. So how are you thinking about this? I mean, I hear what your concerns are and what's happening. Clearly, it's impacting your work. So are you doing some scenario planning? I mean, you're used to doing emergency scenario planning and tabletop exercises. Are you doing your own variation of that for yourselves, and where your priorities are going to be if you can't do all the things that you normally do?
Yes.
Well, I think even before this new administration and the threats of a diminished federal presence in this state, we have been talking about for the last decade about how we position ourselves structurally to enable shared services among our communities. We took a run at that in 2015, 2016, and there's a new bill that's been introduced in the House to explore the transition of planning commissions to councils of government, not just for a new structure, but to expedite and enable more efficiently the shared services where towns voluntarily get together and say, we want to do, these services and we will pay for it. And whether it's a cheaper service, maybe, but it might be more equitable because small towns are not able to provide the services that they maybe traditionally have or would like to. So that's something we will be having a conversation with the General Assembly over the next couple of years, because we see that as a natural way to better serve our communities. And it's something that other areas of the country have been doing for decades. And
I remember talking about that when I was in economic development.
Exactly.
So, but wasn't there also a task force last summer or the summer before,
Yeah,
regional and county
I mentioned
government?
the two chairs of the GovOps committees
Right.
are leading a county and regional governance committee. So the two chairs are different
Right.
than they were last summer. But I think we've heard from both chairs that they plan to pick that work up after the session and have some recommendations for next session.
Yeah, and which is important to do, I think, because we've also talked about, does everybody need to have a road foreman? Can we share snow plowing services? Can we share whatever other services there are?
Yeah, and the governance structure has in my mind, been the biggest barrier. Like I just had two towns that, you probably read about it, Heinsberg and Richmond, that
Yeah.
were trying to figure out how to, share a police department maybe, and, one town contracting with another, and then the chief left one town to go to the other. But, it was just very messy, and but it was just messy because Vermont doesn't make it easy for towns to co-own something.
Right.
A service or
Right.
co-manage a
You
service.
can't pay another town.
You can contract, but then there's a power dynamic, right? Like one's in charge and the other one's paying for it. And so we have to set up a new municipality every time we want to share a service. We have this,
Right, and then there's another structure that we don't need.
Right, exactly.
Right, we don't need any more structures, we need fewer structures.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, there you
I
go.
was just thinking of the Champlain Water District,
That's,
which actually is very successful,
yeah,
which we could probably do in other places. But yeah, the question I really had was, in my experience in education, that's where my experience really has been, is that when you had a supervisory union, you had a couple of big towns, maybe one or two smaller towns. The demands on the SU administration people was really very, very strong from the smaller towns. And the bigger towns who were actually paying more had a little bit of the nose out of joint, I guess you might say, but they had staff and people and, could actually do things on their own. And they had actually greater representation because there was more population. With small, I'm just wondering, is this a similar dynamic where you end up having to put a lot of energy into smaller towns because of their lack of manpower?
I would say,
Do you see as well?
I can answer for our regional planning commission. I think the energy and the effort we put in is different. So the type of services that we provide are different. For example, St. Albans City doesn't call us to write grant applications, but they are by far the largest recipient of our brownfields funding. By far, like no competition. So the services we offer are different.
Like Fairfield or to Fletcher.
and I'd say, and Chittenden County, I identify with that dynamic you're talking about, but that same kind of dynamic, like the services are different. Like we spend more staff time with our smaller towns where they need more staff assistance. But there may be more money because the bigger towns can leverage funds in different ways. So more money may be flowing, but there's also more demands there. Particularly brownfields and things like that, or infrastructure issues in the bigger towns. So it's just different, but not, I never even think of it as less. It's just but staff time wise, it definitely spends more time in the rural.
Yeah, I would agree with what I heard. I think some of our larger communities actually do use our services more, but on different things like grant administration. They may write the grants, but they are just as overwhelmed as everybody else. We've had a lot of our communities with deferring maintenance on their infrastructure and their assets. And now they're trying to quickly catch up because things are at a crisis point. So we can come and help write grants, but also then administer them. Don't have the capacity, even though they have the knowledge, they don't have the hours to do that kind of work.
One last question here. We had a governor we created a structure where the smaller towns, there was money put in to help them develop this during COVID, after COVID with the ARPA money.
Yes.
Did you see any of that money or did you see any impact on that? Or what was the impact you saw?
Yes.
If you're referring to the Municipal Technical Assistance
Yes,
Program,
that's-
MTAP, yes, that was a $3 million appropriation that you made, I think, during budget adjustment in FY '24. And the Agency of Administration has managed that money. It is still in process. They hired the regional planning commissions through my office for about 1/2 of that. And the rest went to other providers, including Preservation Trust and the Vermont Council on Rural Development, some engineering support, Vermont League of Cities and Towns, and there could be other partners that they use. But yes, it did focus on the smallest towns, and it included some housing work, some infrastructure work, capital planning. So all the regional planning commissions are currently working to finish that up. I think the end of that is this calendar year.
So that was a positive thing. You got just.
It was. I mean, it was useful. It accelerated the development of projects and the applications for state and federal money. It wasn't just for federal ARPA money, it was state applications as well, so.
So they were able to use like constructively the money they got from all of that. But the towns and counties gave these money.
For yes, the answer is yes. For the RPC work that we're overseeing, I see the projects and I see the successes, and it has been good.
Okay, all right, continue, thanks. That kind
Was
of.
it?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
We apologize.
I wasn't fishing, I just want to be sure that you've got to tell us everything you wanted. So it sounds like worrying about FEMA and those impacts and the infrastructure investment might be your top two concerns. But you're also continuing to look at how you can collaborate and coordinate among communities, and that's a really important thing, I think.
So our eyes are wide open, as are yours. We haven't panicked, but we are changing the way we are operating by accelerating federal contracts, drawing down quickly, seeking advances when we can rather than reimbursement. And just looking for every opportunity to help the state as well as our communities.
Yeah.
But I also want, before we leave, is thank this committee for your support on our property transfer tax funding. That funding is extraordinarily useful for this state and for us to do our work and draw down the federal funds that we're able to do. It's a great leverage point. So I thank you in these very tough times for that support. Second that.
Well, you guys have been around. Have you had much turnover at the executive director level? You kind of got this
We had
group.
4 new directors 2 years ago, which was
Wow,
remarkable.
that's huge, yeah.
It was huge. Yeah, 2 of them were from, 3 of them actually were already in the RPC world and were promotions, so they were new to us, but it was, yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Great new ideas and talent.
And a lot of experience, which is good in these times as well. So it's a nice combination. Great. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for your work.
Thank you for all your work.
Appreciate what you're doing. Do you have any questions? Jen?
Yeah, I just have are we asking folks to let us know, I mean, after they've testified, to let us know of any cuts that they hear about, or, you know?
Well, if there's
after
some
this?
more stuff that we should know about, who has the RPCs in there? Is that you, Tom?
Yeah.
All right,
Well, at least through the RCC, so.
yeah,
So in the event.
yeah. I mean, if you wanted, there are
something-
things that you want us to know about,
We can keep you posted on
just let us know.
changes, any drastic
Yeah,
changes.
it would be nice to have like I always have this image of like a train board or something in a train station where everything's like.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're up to $875,000 here. And, you know, and footnoted with, I mean, your testimony in terms of like, what does this actually affect? Because each one of those grants has a different role, has a different string attached to it. So we can't just simply say, oh, look, they're down $5 million. Let's just, you know, not that we have it to just hand over, but and, you know, so yeah, I would appreciate an ongoing, like I said, we get caught up in, I get caught up anyway in what I read as a possibility.
Yeah.
And then may not see the correction 3 days later that says, oh, just kidding.
Right.
A little bit of that's been going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to know, because we can hear, we have structures we're putting in place to hear from the administration about state agency, but you're not, you know, you have some money from the state, but you wouldn't report through that mechanism, so we wouldn't necessarily know, so that'd be
So
great.
we can certainly share with you the tangible,
Yeah.
actual terminations or long-term deposits as they arise.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. And, you know, I think, yeah, we're pretty much the size of a state agency. So I think it's totally appropriate if we report up and give you some perspective that way.
That would be
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay, because the concern is the row of dominoes.
Yep.
You know, and being able to like let people know down the line what may or may not happen.
Right,
Right.
So please call on us. We want to be a resource to you all.
yeah. No, we appreciate it. Thank you all for all your work.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in this.
Yes,
All right,
nice
yeah.
seeing
Thank
you
you for all
all.
your work.
Good to see you, thanks.
Yep.
Take care. So committee, we will take a break in just a minute, and then at 10:30, we have economic development and tourism and marketing coming in. So we'll hear them, and then that's it for the morning. And then after the floor, we have Agency of Natural Resources and the Department of Public Safety this afternoon. So 4 a day. Enough depression for anyone.